At the end of the day, a majority of Israeli Arabs and a huge majority, around close to 90% of Israeli Jews, are proud to be Israelis, want to remain living in Israel.
You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Good morning and welcome to Inside Israel Today, here on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. On a day where we are supporting our troops. The IDF is right now in the middle of a new operation to detect and destroy tunnels on the border with Lebanon, and we hope that operation is going well as we tape the show. But we planned these shows in advance, and I only knew about that operation a couple hours ago. So what I plan to speak about on this show is a fascinating study that came out yesterday. The most comprehensive study, I don't think poll is the right word because it's done in face-to-face interviews, is the annual Israel Democracy Index by the Israel Democracy Institute. If you want to understand Israelis and how they think, reading this extremely long, extensive study is really the best way of doing that, and I've been saying that for many, many years. And so I'm happy to have here on my show the president of the Israel Democracy Institute, former Knesset member Yohanan Plesner. Yohanan, thank you for coming on Inside Israel Today.
Hi, Gil. Thanks for having me.
Yohanan, what do you think was the most important finding of your study?
I think that what we're beginning to see, I would say two areas. Number one is how Israel is ranking internationally in a comparative sense vis-a-vis other countries and other OECD countries in indices like government functioning, how do we deal with corruption, civic rights, and so on and so forth. So the study really collects the leading, most important global indicators and demonstrates how we're doing and what are the trends. And it's a very instructive and important data point that can help us improve the affairs of the state. So if it's okay, I'll just, my main findings when we look at the comparative sense is that we see that Israel is among OECD countries, among most of countries in the world, in most indicators, we're in the top quarter. And obviously that's not a big surprise because we're a developed country and developed economy. When we compare ourselves to OECD countries, I think we can strive to do a somewhat better job. We're sort of medium, sort of a little bit under the average, somewhere between 20 and 25th place out of 36 OECD countries when it comes to parameters of government functioning, how do we deal with corruption, rule of law, and so on. So while the situation is obviously not great, it's mediocre, and we know what to do in order to move up in those rankings.
Well, it sounds like we have some work to be done to move up if nearly half of Israelis say that the leadership of Israel is corrupt. And then this study came out at a time when corruption is at the top of the priorities of the people, with the Prime Minister going through what he's going through. Yeah,
so interestingly, there's a distinction. When you compare Israel to other countries, so the way we deal institutionally, Israel is not a corrupt country in the sense that the way the rankings we get from international institutions like Transparency International and the likes are that we have institutions, independent law enforcement institutions that enable us to deal with the matters of corruption. At the same time, when you ask Israelis, how do you rank your politicians? How do you rank your leadership? Yeah, the majority of Israelis do unfortunately think that our politicians are corrupt. When we compare between institutions, then about 70% of Israelis think that the government is corrupt. And in this respect, our politicians need to do a much better job, and our political leadership, in gaining the trust of the Israeli people.
I was very excited to see that when asked which state institutions Israelis trust, they trust the media at 33% and the Knesset at 30%. So, this came out yesterday. I'm in the Knesset all day, and I could say to the Knesset members, hey, the public trusts us more than they trust you.
Yeah, well, I mean, both figures are not very inspiring.
Yes, you're right.
Our listeners would probably not be surprised that the institution that gains the highest level of trust of Israelis, and it's a consistent finding, is the IDF. Around 90% of Israelis trust the IDF, and the lowest are, unfortunately, the political institutions that are elected, representative institutions that are elected by the people. So the Knesset, the government, the political parties are around 15% levels of trust. So Israelis don't trust the institutions that they themselves elect, and the professional institutions such as the Supreme Court, although it has been founded and there was a very blunt campaign to undermine the public trust both in the Supreme Court, in the Attorney General, and in the police. All of them enjoy a lot more trust than the politicians themselves that attack those institutions. And unfortunately, the media is also is much closer to the politicians than to the other professional institutions. And this is for sure a call for action.
I definitely found it fascinating that the Israeli right likes the media a lot less than the rest of the public, even and that's been happening over time, that they've liked the media less and less and less, while the media in Israel is actually becoming more right-wing. More and more media outlets have been purposely, for marketing reasons more than anything, become more right-wing as the people of Israel have become more right-wing. They have to. I found that to be a fascinating result, but you don't have to comment on that. I wanted to ask you, Haaretz, their headline is study nearly half of Israelis fear grave danger to democracy. Why would that be, Yohanan?
Well, that's again a finding that we have to take note of and very seriously. A big chunk of Israelis think that, as you mentioned, around half think that there's a severe danger to Israeli democracy, and it's mainly they're fearful that our democracy is being eroded into an electoral democracy, a democracy that we merely elect our political leadership and then provide it, so to speak, absolute power without the other elements of the substance that constitute a substantive democracy that include the separation of powers, an independent judiciary, professional civil service, other sources of professionalism that allow to devolve power and to ensure the rule of law, protection of minorities, protection of basic freedoms like freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and freedom from religion. Israelis, a big number of Israelis are very fearful that those basic tenets of our system of government are under attack. And this is something that, if you look, a few years back, there is no doubt that we are experiencing deterioration in this respect. Also, Gil, if I compare on areas such as civic rights, that it's a Freedom House, an international institution by the name of Freedom House, ranks civic rights among the different countries, including OECD countries, and it looks at areas such as freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and rule of law, and so on. And in this indicator, we're number 34 out of 36 OECD countries, and we are in front, ahead only of Mexico and Turkey. So I think that in those areas, there's no doubt, even if those Israelis who think that we're in a severe danger, even if their interpretation might be too gloomy, there's no doubt that there's a major challenge. We cannot take our democracy for granted. We need to strengthen it, to protect it. And this is one of our vocations at the Israel Democracy Institute.
Before I ask my last question, I want to point out one other number that I found very interesting, was that the trust in the police went up from 42% to 52% in 1 year, at a time where, the police are going through difficulties institutionally. They can't even appoint their own new chief, and the previous one wasn't so inspiring. And it came out a day after, obviously the study is taken out much before, Netanyahu spent half an hour attacking the police in a speech to the Likud Central Committee. So there were media outlets in Israel that headlined the study with that jump in support for police. But my last question to Yohanan would be, what positive news is there from the study? This is a radio network that really focuses on the positive of Israel.
Well, there's a lot of positive news. I would say the most positive is that a huge number of Israelis, the majority, Israelis of all shades, brands, and viewpoints, are proud to be Israeli.
Including Arabs, right?
Even a majority of Israeli Arabs. And, as much as, many of them feel that they're Palestinians with an Israeli citizenship, we see that at the end of the day, a majority of Israeli Arabs and a huge majority, around close to 90% of Israeli Jews, are proud to be Israelis, want to remain living in Israel, think that the general shape of our country is good or very good, and personally, Israelis feel good, even those who do not agree with some of the sort of collective public trends, feel good in this country and do not feel alienated. And in this respect, the foundations of our democracy and nation state, the Jewish people, are proud of our country and are ready to make the necessary sacrifices in order to take it to the next level. So there's a lot of good to work with, and at the same time we have some major challenges.
Well, it's a good thing the Israel Democracy Institute exists, and thank you for taking the time to come here on Inside Israel Today, Yohanan Plesner.
Thanks, Gil. Thank you very much.
Listeners, we'll come back after the break and talk about other developments. Stay with us.
Hanukkah Sameach to all of our listeners. Let's keep our lights shining bright.
Happy Hanukkah from the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
Hi, this is Gil Hoffman, host of Inside Israel Today. Happy Hanukkah from Jerusalem. And we're back here on Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are here at a time when the IDF is in the middle of an operation to detect and destroy tunnels that were emerging from Lebanon into Israel, which is very scary, to know about this. The Hezbollah could have invaded our country via these tunnels, and it's a wonderful thing that the operation is going on right now to stop them. And I think that it really puts into perspective what's been going on here politically over the last month or two, that we almost went to an election, and the reason why Netanyahu said that he couldn't go to an election was that the government had to be in power to deal with various security threats that Israel was facing, and no one seemed to know what he was talking about. Both the defense minister who quit, Avigdor Lieberman, and Naftali Bennett, who wanted to be defense minister, both said in their faction meetings, we don't know what he meant. And the truth is, apparently, Netanyahu, among other things, had in mind that the gravest security threat, immediately at least, came not from Gaza or from Hamas, but from the Hezbollah in Lebanon. and it puts into question the judgment of Victor Lieberman of why he decided to quit, despite he must have known about this. And you can understand why Naftali Bennett, who entered politics, as he says all the time, because he was a soldier in the Second Lebanon War, and he didn't like the way that war was handled and thought that it left Israel with a grave security threat. You can understand why he really wants, more than ever, to be the Minister of Defense, to be involved in fixing things up there on that border. This is something that reminds us that, with all due respect to all the politics that we have in Israel, our enemies haven't stopped trying to kill us. Even when things are more calm in the area, you never know when things are going to change dramatically. And it's wonderful that we have gotten into the business of preempting war. Having the tunnels on the border with Gaza detected and destroyed, having the tunnels on the border between Israel and Lebanon detected and destroyed. This shows that we are taking action before war breaks out, stopping war from breaking out. The whole point of the Iron Dome anti-missile defense system is to prevent there from being the kind of successful Hamas strike on Israel that would force Israel to go to war. Israelis are taking not only defensive measures, but preemptive measures. That is apparently the solution to the era in which there's asymmetric warfare, in which being the stronger army is actually sometimes a negative when wars are fought, among other places, in the media. So I encourage people to stay tuned to www.jpost.com to follow all the excitement and action as is going to be happening today in that operation. And I'm sure that the show hosts over here on the Land of Israel Network will have plenty to say about that as well. But I have a feeling that the show hosts here are going to be focusing more on Hanukkah, which is going on right now. We lit our second candle last night, and it's wonderful living in a country where so much of the focus is on Hanukkah. I, of course, grew up in the United States where they focused on other holidays around this time of year, and that's okay too. But I wanted to live in a Jewish country, and that's part of the reason that I moved here. And my children have no idea that in America, Hanukkah has something to do with presents, which is something that is mostly because of Christmas. We don't do that over here. In Israel, Hanukkah is about the defeat of assimilation that happened when the Jews decided to not assimilate with the Greeks, and instead to stand up to them and to the Jews who wanted to assimilate with the Greeks. And if anything, the way Hanukkah is celebrated in America, where Hanukkah and Christmas are equated as being one holiday that's all about light, misses the point. The last thing that I want to talk about the show today is something that happened last night in honor of Hanukkah. Every year on Hanukkah, Nefesh B'Nefesh, the organization that brings Jews from the United States to Israel, hosts what's called a Panoply, which is a quiz night where the smartest of the English speakers around Jerusalem come together and are asked trivia questions. And I've been going to these quiz nights for close to 20 years now. Even before Nefesh B'Nefesh existed, they had these quiz nights. I've been very fortunate to be on a very good team for most of those years. And so I'm proud to report here on Inside Israel today that my team won the contest last night, emerging victorious. Our third time over the last 7 years that we won the contest, and we finished second 5 times over the last 15 or so. So it was a great experience, and I'm very thankful to my teammates who made the win happen, because I don't know how much I contributed myself. Personally, I definitely contributed personnelly in bringing together a team of some of the smartest Anglos in Jerusalem. And I think it fits very well with Hanukkah, because Hanukkah celebrates the Jewish people wanting to be Jews and wanting to be smart, wanting to study, wanting to know about who they are, and wanting to resist cultures that are not our own. And so while the questions were about lots of things going on in the world, in fact, more about cultures that are not our own, it really celebrated the Jewish brain, this contest that we had last night. Listeners around the world know that the Jewish people are very special, and we are celebrating that right now on this holiday, and the Panoply is a great part of it. Thank you for being here with us on Inside Israel Today, on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. Happy Hanukkah and Shalom from Jerusalem.
To make war upon rebellion is messy and slow, says T.E. Lawrence, like eating soup with a knife. Now I admit, I find life messy, but I never seem to feel that it's slow. I'm Rav Mike Feuer, and this is The Jewish Story.
Join Rav Mike Feuer for the best Jewish history podcast, The Jewish Story, on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.